Hello, you're welcome. You're welcome onto my channel today, and it gives me great joy to observe you are viewing this video. I'm Professor Olayinka Akanle. I am a lecturer in the university. On this channel, I do a number of sources, but research and sociology are central to what I do on this channel. I love research. Meanwhile, if you have not subscribed to this channel previously, kindly go ahead and click subscribe on your screen right now. Tap subscribe on your screen right now to join my family of subscribers. And also, so you might be alerted every time I drop new videos. Generalization in research. Generalization in research. This is the topic of this video. And this is a very important issue in research because most of the time, people feel, well, we have to generalize. We have to expand the findings to other situations, other contexts. So some people, when they think about research, what comes to their mind first is generalization, but this does not have to be so. And this is also problematic in some sense. So what is generalization? So I will tell you in this video what generalization is. I will tell you types of generalization. I will tell you the limitation of generalization. I will tell you what to do should you want to generalize. And I will tell you some overall problems of generalization. So stay tuned. Generalization can be described as a process of applying findings of a specific research, a specific study to broader population, broader contexts, broader situation, broader settings, broader research areas, or areas that were not researched at all. So that means it's a process actually because you have to follow through right from the time you are conceiving the research up to the time you conducted the research, up to the time you started the analysis and findings, and we are concluding. So it's not a situation, it's not an event, it's a process, methodical process. So generalization simply means process of applying findings, results, conclusions, recommendations of a specific study, research, to a broader population or broader context, or to broader populations or broader context. So you just want to apply it, you expand it, you've conducted a study in Washington, D.C. Now you want to apply, the findings from that studies in Washington, D.C. to New York, or Texas, to many places, to Los Angeles and the rest of it, because of certain assumptions that you've got. Probably because you're thinking, well, this is United States, the population of United States, Americans are Americans. You have some assumptions in your mind, some variables in your mind that makes you think, okay, you can generalize. And this must be taken very seriously. Before you can talk about generalization, you have some assumptions, some beliefs, some convictions. For example, you believe that the population is homogeneous, the society is homogeneous, or you believe the time of the research is homogeneous, the issues you research are common across different populations. So there must be assumption for you to think is generalizable. And these assumptions are also part of the problems because things might not seem the way they appear in reality. So and it's very common, especially in quantitative studies, in survey research design, or where people use questionnaire. So people think, okay, the essence of using questionnaire also most of the time is because people want to generalize. That may not necessarily be so, but it's very common in quantitative study. And you want to have broader conclusions, then you want to make inferences. So when you make inferences in other populations, other settings, based on the result of findings or conclusion or recommendation of a research, you're already talking about generalization. And there are two broad types of generalization. You have case-to-case generalization, and you have sample-to-population generalization. Sample to population generalization. And also you have what we call case-to-case generalization. So case-to-case generalization simply means you want to transfer findings from one case to another case. For example, you are doing case study, or depending on the research you are doing with the social research, we're talking about social science research, we're talking about medical research, or engineering research. You've taken this case to study, in depth. Then you say, okay, I took this case from a population, and it's okay, based on my findings, any case like this, I can conclude that this will also be the experiences or findings. So case to case generalization. Then you have sample to population generalization. And this is the most common actually, where people think, okay, I've drawn sample, you've used. Meanwhile, you cannot just draw your sample, just because you feel like. There are processes. Don't forget this is a science. And they also fall within the broad spectrum of sociology as a science. So you have to view my video on relationship between research, theory and research, view the video on objectivity and subjectivity, view my video on sociology as a science. To what extent sociology is science? View my video on paradigm. View my video on perspectives and sampling. My video on sampling. Meanwhile, in fact, look at my playlist on research and exhaust the videos one after the other. That will make you a pro. So that means you've drawn samples, you've determined your sample size by using sampling formula, if you are doing quantitative study, or you have used point of saturation, based on a priori knowledge or previous experience to determine your qualitative, sample size. So, but you must have a benchmark through which you are picking your sample. So people believe, okay, if you pick a representative sample certainly will be 10% of the total population. But if you don't have the fund and you cannot do census that is total coverage of the population, you want to pick, okay, sample 10%. But if you cannot afford, imagine picking a 10% of 20 million. That's true. You may not have enough money for that sample. Then you are there to determine the sample size using some formula which are available online. Whether formula for known population or formula for unknown population, you have to determine the sample size. So I don't want to mention any formula here. There are many of them which you can get, but you must use formula to determine your sample size. Some people believe that once you pick your sample and the sample is representative. Meanwhile, I have different videos on sampling on this channel. Random sampling, systematic sampling, all different types of sampling I have on this channel. So view those sampling methods on my channel. So people believe once you pick, especially for quantitative research, you can do this. You can use this to also use to determine your sample size. Essentially, I hope you understand what I'm saying. You can use this. You can say, okay, I want to use simple random depending on what you are looking at, or you want to use systematic random sampling, or you want to use different types of sampling. You can look at it as, okay, which sampling is the most appropriate, so that I want to generalize. Or even if you don't want to generalize, you can just look at it and say, okay, look at it, okay, which sample size, depending on your problem you want to study, depending on your the interest you have in mind. But all you are interested in is perhaps representativeness of your sample, whereby you can capture different socio-demographics elements, the gender, the age, the ethnic group, the religion, and many other things that you believe are in that population and you want to sample. So you have, sampling is very methodical and you must be detailed to the ground. Are you using multi-stage sampling, which you can find on this channel? So when you now look at all of this, you can say, okay, I want to now generalize. But now don't forget the quality of your sampling will determine the quality of your generalization. If your sample is not representative, if it's not so methodical and so detailed, definitely you cannot generalize. So the depth, the quality of your sampling will determine the final analysis whether you can generalize or not. Now the problem there is that there are limitations. And these are the problems. Generalization, as much as it is good, you have to be careful. In fact, most of the time, generalizations run into problems because there are so many limitations that can make you not to be able to generalize easily. And if you want to generalize, you must answer a lot of questions. How big is your sample? Is your sample so big? Is it 10%, 20%, 30% of the total population? If not, you can't generalize. If your sample is too small or is very small, then to what extent is your sample representative of the total population? Have you taken into cognizance the age of population and that in your sample? Have you determined the gender? Have you determined the level of education? Have you determined the geography? Have you determined the economic characteristics? So how diverse is your sample? How diverse is your sample? Is your sample big enough? Then the settings, are you sure the setting where you conduct the research is exactly the same as where you want to generalize? Look at the example I gave in Washington, D.C. and New York. Is New York and Washington exactly the same? in all respects? Well, that is left to you. So if the settings are not entirely the same, then it will be difficult to generalize. Then the population, is population homogeneous? Is your sample homogeneous? Is population heterogeneous? Is your sample sufficiently heterogeneous to mirror the population you want to generalize to, or the settings you want to generalize to? Then is the culture the same? Are they essentially of same culture? If they have different cultures, then that would be a problem. You did a study among the, African American, and you want to generalize, define it to Asian Americans or Latin American. So is the culture the same? Then the time of your study is the time. Are you generalizing at the same time? Time is also a factor. Then, why you can even talk about generalization in quantitative research, you cannot even talk about generalization in qualitative research. We don't generalize in qualitative research because we are interested in the context, the meanings, the social structure, the normativities, the values driving the action, the meanings that people attach to their action. Talking about subjectivity. Subjectivity is more pronounced in quality than quantity studies. So in qualitative study, generalization is actually problematic and is not recommended at all. Even though with all the problems, if you are thinking of generalization, then you can always talk about that in quantitative study. So for you to be able to generalize at all, aside the limitations I've mentioned, then you must have large sample size, very large. Your sample must have been determined scientifically. Your sample must be diverse and mirror the general population. Then the context must be identical and related. Then the time, how long did you stay on the research? How deep is the research? Did you do longitudinal study? Your research design, was it longitudinal? How long did you do it? To be able to say, yeah, I've covered all the angles. So this is very important. So now, it can be very easy, as much as generalization is common, is sometimes done, it has a lot of problems. Because major problems also include findings may not accurately apply to what you are generalizing it to. Even in identical population, it may not accurately reflect because the study, was not done in all the populations, all the different settings, was done in a place. To what extent can we say, okay, this way you want to generalize to is a carbon copy of where the result was done? We can ask you some serious questions and you will definitely understand that the generalization is not just cut and paste and it's not easy. So the findings may not accurately apply to what you want to generalize to. And again, it may not be suitable, it's not suitable for qualitative study, certainly. And sometimes the study is limited in scope, so you cannot just generalize to the scope that the study did not cover. And it can easily be falsified. Your generalization can be falsified in the sense that it can simply be disproved, by new findings. New findings can emerge, new realities can emerge that will just falsify your findings that you are generalizing. So then it's not easy to have apple for apple, orange for orange, population to the extent that you can just generalize like that. Sometimes there are uniqueness in societies and in populations that may make it difficult. And your sample may not be 100% representative. Though you may have degree of freedom, you may have degree of certainty, even at that, the sample may not necessarily be a carbon copy, of the general population. If you want to generalize if you are talking about sample to population generalization, if you are talking about case-to-case generalization, the two cases may not be exactly the same. Just like the sample may not necessarily exactly be the same as the total population. So extreme care is needed. We have to be very careful when we're talking about generalization. And sometimes in my case, I simply limit my findings and recommendations and conclusions to that context where I conducted my research and to that time where I conducted my research. That's why it's called research. In any case, if I'm interested in some other population, in some other case, I simply conduct a new research there, get funding, and do new research in those places. Because I believe generalization is not without problems and can be essentially falsified and problematic. So extreme care is needed. If you want to generalize, good luck. Just be careful. Take extreme care so that you don't generalize in error. And if you want to do new research pattern, that's why it's called research. You can search and research and search again. Till I see you in my next video. Bye for now.